Sometimes the people we overlook are the ones holding the brightest light. In one classroom, a teacher dismissed a quiet student again and again, never expecting much from him. But what happened next left every jaw in the room hanging. Stay with me, because this story will surprise you at every turn, and by the end, you'll see why we should never underestimate anyone. And hey, if you love stories that inspire and challenge assumptions, make sure to subscribe for more like this. It was the start of a new school year, and the classroom buzzed with fresh energy. Students filled the rows of desks, chatting nervously about subjects, teachers, and what lay ahead. At the front stood Mr. Harrison, a seasoned teacher with decades of experience. His sharp eyes scanned the room, quickly forming silent judgments about each student. Among them sat David, a quiet boy who preferred to stay unnoticed. He rarely raised his hand, rarely spoke out loud, and always kept his gaze fixed on his notebook. To his classmates, he was simply the quiet kid. To Mr. Harrison, he seemed like just another student who wouldn't contribute much. The teachers' favorites quickly became obvious. The outspoken, confident kids who didn't hesitate to answer questions, even when they weren't fully right. Mr. Harrison smiled at them, encouraged them, and gave them second chances when they stumbled. But when David hesitated, the teacher often moved on without waiting. The other students noticed too. Some whispered, some chuckled, and slowly a pattern emerged. David wasn't being called on. His voice didn't matter, and for a while, David accepted it. He sat in silence, scribbling in his notebook, absorbing every detail while others fought for attention. But the truth was, David wasn't just listening. He was thinking deeper, connecting ideas in ways nobody else dared to. And soon, a moment would arrive that would flip the entire classroom's perception upside down, because sometimes silence isn't emptiness. Sometimes silence is preparation. The first real spark happened one chilly Tuesday morning. Mr. Harrison stood at the blackboard, scribbling down a tough math problem that made half the class groan. "All right," he said confidently. "Who can solve this?" Hands shot up. The usual suspects, the loud, eager students, waved their arms high. Mr. Harrison nodded toward one of them. The student walked to the board, tried, stumbled, and got the equation wrong. Mr. Harrison chuckled and gave a gentle pat on the shoulder. "Good try, sit down. Who's next?" Again, a few hands rose. This time, David's hand lifted too, hesitant, almost invisible. But Mr. Harrison's eyes passed right over him. He didn't even pause. Instead, he pointed to another student across the room. David lowered his hands slowly, pretending like it didn't matter. But inside, a small sting burned. It wasn't the first time. In fact, it was becoming a pattern. Every time he tried, his voice was ignored. That day, the second student failed as well. The classroom filled with murmurs. Mr. Harrison frowned, clearly frustrated. "Doesn't anyone know the answer?" he muttered. David's hand rose again, this time a little higher, a little braver. Still, nothing. Mr. Harrison scanned the room, looked right past him, and instead called on another. Of his favorites, another wrong answer. Another laugh, another wasted chance. Now whispers turned into giggles. Some kids glanced at David, smirking as if to say, of course he wouldn't be chosen. Why would he? David clenched his pencil, pressing it so hard against the notebook that the tip snapped. He didn't show anger, didn't roll his eyes, didn't protest. But deep inside, something shifted. He was done being invisible, and soon one moment would arrive, a moment no one, not even Mr. Harrison, could ignore. The days rolled on, but the pattern stayed the same. Each lesson, Mr. Harrison looked for. Eager hands, never David's. One afternoon, the tension snapped into the open. Mr. Harrison gave out a tricky history question. Who can explain why revolutions often start with the common people? The room filled with silence. A few students shuffled in their seats, unsure. Slowly, David's hand rose, not halfway this time, straight up, firm, confident. For a second, Mr. Harrison's eyes landed on him. The class turned, surprised to even see David volunteering. A flicker of hope lit in his chest. But then, "Yes, Melissa, go ahead," the teacher said, pointing to another student across the room. A few kids snickered. One whispered just loud enough for David to hear, "Don't bother, he never picks you." David's ears burned. He lowered his hand, pretending not to care, but his notebook told the truth. He had written the full answer, clear, precise, before anyone else even tried. Melissa stumbled through an explanation, missing key points. Mr. Harrison sighed, corrected her, and moved on. Again, David's answer remained unheard, buried in silence. By now, the class had caught on. Each time David raised his hand, the same cycle repeated. Some students found it funny, others pitied him, but no one expected him to speak up. But inside David, something was building, like pressure in a sealed bottle. He wasn't just storing answers. He was storing energy, frustration, determination. And he knew, the moment he got his chance, he wouldn't waste it. Then one morning that chance came. Mr. Harrison posed the toughest question of the semester, a question that left the entire class stumped. Hands stayed down, silence filled the air, and slowly, confidently, David raised his hand. This time he refused to lower it. The room felt heavy with silence. Mr. Harrison's question lingered in the air, unanswered. He scanned the class, waiting for a brave soul to try, but this time no hands went up, not a single one except David's. Slowly, almost defiantly, David raised his arm higher than ever before. Every eye in the room turned toward him. The quiet kid, the invisible one, was making himself seen. For the first time, Mr. Harrison hesitated. His gaze landed on David's determined eyes. The class whispered, surprised. Some smirked, waiting for the embarrassment they were sure would follow. But David didn't flinch. He held his hand steady, his expression calm, almost daring the teacher to ignore him again. Seconds dragged on like hours. The tension was unbearable. Finally, Mr. Harrison let out a dry chuckle. "All right then," he said, almost dismissively. "Let's see what you've got." The classroom buzzed with anticipation. Was David about to embarrass himself in front of everyone, or was something else about to happen? David stood, his notebook in hand, and walked slowly toward the front of the class. His footsteps echoed in the quiet room. Even the students who had mocked him fell silent. He turned toward the board, picked up the chalk, and began to write. What he revealed in that moment would not only silence the laughter, but also leave the teacher and every single student completely stunned. And what David said next changed everything. The chalk squeaked against the board as David's hand moved with surprising speed. Line by line, number by number, he laid out the solution to the complicated problem that had left the entire class stumped. His handwriting was sharp, deliberate, almost too precise for someone who had never been noticed before. At first, the students watched with smirks, expecting him to fumble. But as his answer unfolded, their smirks faded. Whispers began to spread. "Wait, that's right," one muttered. Another leaned forward, eyes widening. Even Mr. Harrison, arms crossed and lips pursed, began to shift uneasily. David didn't pause. He finished the last step, set the chalk down and turned. His voice, calm, steady, and surprisingly confident, broke the silence. "That's the correct solution, sir." For a long moment the classroom froze. Mr. Harrison walked slowly toward the board, double-checking each step. His eyes darted from line to line, his expression changing from skepticism to shock. Finally he cleared his throat. "Well, it seems he's absolutely correct." The room erupted. Gasps, whispers, even applause. The very same students who had ignored him now stared at him as if seeing him for the first time. David didn't smile, didn't gloat. He simply returned to his seat, his notebook in hand. But something had shifted forever. The next day, it happened again. A tough literature question no one dared answer. David raised his hand. This time, Mr. Harrison called on him almost immediately. And again, David delivered an explanation so clear that the class sat stunned. Day after day, moment after moment, David proved himself. His answers weren't just correct. They were insightful, deeper than expected from any student. The quiet boy they had once ignored became the very student everyone leaned on when things got tough. As for Mr. Harrison, something inside him changed too. He began to pause more before dismissing students, realizing the danger of assumptions. Slowly, his tone toward David softened. Encouragement replaced dismissal. Respect replaced indifference. One Friday afternoon, as class ended, Mr. Harrison stopped David before he left. For the first time, he looked him straight in the eye and said, "David, you've taught me something important. I was wrong to overlook you. You reminded me that brilliance doesn't always shout, it often whispers." David nodded politely, but inside those words meant more than any grade ever could, because in that classroom he wasn't invisible anymore. He was unstoppable. The story of David isn't just about a classroom or a single problem on the board. It's about something much bigger, something we all face in our own lives. How often do we judge someone too quickly? Maybe by their silence, their shyness, or the way they carry themselves. How often do we mistake quietness for weakness, or overlook someone simply because they don't demand the spotlight? Mr. Harrison did what many of us do. He assumed. He assumed the loudest voices held the best answers, that the most confident students were the most capable. But David shattered that illusion. He showed that true brilliance doesn't always announce itself with noise. Sometimes it waits patiently, preparing for the perfect moment to shine. And when it does, it changes everything. David's victory wasn't just solving a problem. It was proving a truth. Everyone has value, everyone has potential, and sometimes the strongest people are the ones we notice the least. So what do we take from this? Never underestimate anyone. Never dismiss a person because they seem quiet, different, or overlooked. Because behind that silence, there might be a storm of ideas, dreams, and talent just waiting for one chance to be seen. And if you're someone like David, someone who feels invisible, remember this. Being overlooked doesn't mean you're unworthy. It just means your breakthrough moment hasn't come yet. Keep preparing, keep growing, and when your time comes, you'll leave the world in awe. Now, before you scroll away, let me ask you, if this story inspired you, if it reminded you of the quiet power inside yourself or someone you know, don't keep it to yourself. Share it. Let others feel the same spark you felt. And if you want more stories like this, stories that uplift, surprise, and remind us of life's deeper lessons, hit that subscribe button, drop a like, and let's keep building this community together. Because sometimes the smallest voices carry the greatest truths.